recording. And good. Welcome to the art of the consultation. You can see the screen. The perfect. So welcome. And firstly, thank you to Entity Med for sponsoring this. And I'm glad we have their backing to facilitate this training. As I mentioned, it's a six session, 3 month program. I'm recording. I'll make sure that you get a copy so you can refer back to it. And if you miss any sessions, that will be available to you. So let me just jump straight in. So I've sent this via an email, but again, just to sort of give you the format over the next 6 sessions. So the reality is with sales training, I always call it a contact sport. It's you can read books, you can watch videos. The real learning comes with doing. And so I encourage you to experiment as we go through this, put things into practice and reflect on the results. And we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. I lay out a sort of a structure. The reality is, as we move through this, we tend to sort of move around quite a lot because it needs to be in the moment, needs to be real. It's all about how we engage with patients. Today, I want to sort of set the tone. I do want to get into some questioning skills, which is session 2. But we'll get into some of that today because I want to give you some tangible exercises to go away with. How do we then open the consultation? So a little bit round the wrong way. So questioning comes after opening, which is session 3. Again, I'm keen to get sort of tangible skills into your hands so you can go and use them. And then how do we make the suggestion and close? And then ultimately, how do we handle objections? So again, you'll see a bit of fluidity and expect that. And that's good. I work with who's in the room as opposed to just, as I call it, a wash and a wax, and feel free to ask questions, put your hand up, jump in. If you're not comfortable doing that, then just put a note in the chat. I'll see it and then respond accordingly. Winston Churchill, I learned a lot about him in my high school, or in school as we call it. And he was our wartime World War II prime minister. And he was full of quotes. Oh, let me just let Peggy in. So, hey, Peggy. So he was our wartime prime minister. He was full of quotes. And one I like is, I'm always willing to learn, though I do not always like being taught. And I think that relates to a lot of us, especially as we get older. And I'm very much like that. I like to learn things. I just don't want to be told what to do. So my style as we go through this program is to explore. I'm going to share best practices. I've been in sales 30 years. I've been in this industry as a sales trainer, consultant, the art of the consultation, for 6-7 years now, delivering some phenomenal results when people take this methodology and apply it. So again, I'm never going to sort of say you have to do it. It's take this, apply it to yourself. I think authenticity, your personality is so important in building relationships. And think of this as a skill set, as a set of tools and techniques you overlay, over you to get the better results, or different results. So that's my style. So as we go through that, sort of expect that quite a bit. So let's sort of jump in. I want to talk about how do you differentiate you, how you differentiate your treatments, how you differentiate your practice. How many hotels do you see here? It's not a hard
Six.
question. Six. Yeah. Um, and the reality, it's one. It's all part of Marriott. So and actually, I think there's about 30 different hotel brands under the Marriott company. So, and the reason I sort of say this is you are providing to the layperson. I'm thinking about that person that's maybe coming in for a treatment for the first time. You are providing treatments that look exactly the same as someone else's treatment. Um, you know, 10 units of Botox from you is exactly the same as 10 units from Botox from somebody else. Now, I know you're going to argue against that, and absolutely, because we know it's not just units of Botox. We also know it's, the artist as a provider. But I'm thinking about it from, maybe your average consumer, which is why price becomes such an important thing. How much for a unit of Botox? Because that's how they're differentiating you. They don't see the difference. If we take some of these devices, Morpheus 8 with one person and a Morpheus 8 down the road, what's the difference? It's Morpheus 8, and the manufacturers want that to be as simple as that. It's a Morpheus 8. You're buying Morpheus 8. You're not buying necessarily you. So how do we differentiate you? How do we differentiate you in terms of the front desk answering the phone? How do we differentiate the providers, the doctors? How do we differentiate individuals, treatments, and practices? And so, again, as we go through this, I want to start answering this question. And something I've come up with years ago, and I still say it, the relationship that you have with the customer, with the patient, is the one thing, the only thing that your competitor cannot copy. So when you think about this, you become absolutely critical, in terms of this relationship, because you can't be copied. They can do it differently, but they can't copy you. They can copy Botox. They can buy the same device. They can paint the walls the same. They can do so many things. But what really truly differentiates you is that relationship and how you create that relationship. So when I go through this program, I've got that in the back of my mind in terms of what differentiates you. How do we stand out from everybody else? So keep that in mind, and for me, sales, we've all got, and we'll come on to this in a minute, we've all got preconceived ideas of what sales is, and it's a dirty word, and I don't want to be a salesperson. As I say, I've been in sales 30 years. Sales is being of service. It's about giving customers what they need, and that's at the same time saying no and walking away. Again, that's being of service if it's not the right solution, the right treatment for them. So it's all about, for me, how we build that relationship. I like this, a bit of self-deprecation. I was working for IBM, early days of my sales career. I was about 27, 28. Judy Rafferty was the chief information officer. So very important person in my life. Very big company, Del Monte. I'm sure we're familiar with their pineapples. And she once said to me, "You're not the best salesperson I've ever had, but you are the most trustworthy." And with that, she awarded me a $750,000, let's say dollars. It was UK pounds, but a $750,000 contract. As she sort of told me that, and for days I was mortified and distraught, and 27, my ego was just burst. I'm not very good. And then afterwards, I thought about it. Well, hang on, I got the deal. So actually, wasn't that good sales? And so that's what I mean is I'm going to share tools, techniques, but bring your personality, bring your authenticity, bring who you are to this, because that's what people want. And it's interesting, we run a contact center, and all the people we have in our team as patient coordinators, front desk, they've all bring their personality to represent our clients. And it's interesting because AI is huge. It's it's the future, but it's like there's no personality. Ultimately there's efficiency, but there's people want connection as well. So let's not let's not move away from that. Let's really use it to differentiate you. Again, if there's any questions as we go through, don't be afraid to just jump in, say, put your hand up, whatever. Okay, this is an academic model and it's the learning circle. And I share this because it formulates how we learn. So this is not how I'm going to teach you. This is just how you learn things in life, learning to walk. Everything is, we go through this circle and it's a continuous loop. And let's start at experience. What is happening right now between us is an experience. So that's it. That's a fact. This is the experience. Now, afterwards, you may think that was a great experience. I hope you do. But you also might think, I'm not sure. And it really doesn't matter. He may go away. He said this. I don't know if I agree with that. That's the experience. The key now is to reflect. Is what did I like about that? What was good? What happened? Why did I feel that way? And it's that reflection that leads us into, I've forgotten the word, develop. And when we then move from reflection into develop, that's when you then start to take this learning and apply it in your own way. And as you then develop, you then move into experiments. And that's where you've got to do it. You may try some of this with a consultation this afternoon or when the phone rings and you answer it. Whatever that situation is, you have to give it a go. That's an experiment. As you experiment, you then move back into now you're having an experience. You're now in the moment, you're putting it into practice. Now you're having an experience. Is the experience good? How do you feel? And when we learn, we have to go through that sort of pain moment. And I always think about watching a toddler baby starting to walk for the first time. They can get from A to B much quicker crawling than they can walking. And it would be very easy to think, okay, this is the quickest way is me, to crawl around the room. And yet the goal is bigger. And so they have to go through that. And so in the short term, it's still quicker to crawl. And you often see that. They try walking, they want to get to mummy or daddy or food. And so they fall onto their hands and knees and scarper across the floor because it's quicker. But ultimately, they've got to walk. And that's the situation we're in. As you do these tools and techniques, as you experiment, you're going to have an experience. The experience may be good. The experience may not be as good. And it's very easy at that point just to go back to what you used to do. And that's where a lot of training fails because it's like, it didn't feel good. The customer didn't seem, or the patient seemed a little bit agitated. I'm going to go back to what I know works. And we default back and we don't grow as an individual. We don't progress. And so therefore, regardless of the outcome, I want you to reflect what was good, what worked, what didn't work, what could I have done differently? Why did that happen? But also bring it to the next session. I've been in 30 years, I've been through every single sales environment. I've sold, a $20 offering. I've sold hundreds of millions of dollars in one deal. And recently I got it wrong completely. I was in a potential situation. I did everything and, the wheels fell off. It didn't come to the outcome. And I reflected, I got it wrong. I said, I didn't approach it in the right way. I did things that it wasn't as eloquent as it should have been. and sort of the deal's gone quiet. It's not dead yet, but in my mind, I don't think they're going to come back. And so you're never going to get it always right. You're dealing with human beings. We're all different. We react differently. So even when you're perfect, you can get it wrong because they're different. And so, again, look at that as part of this, what's going on in their world, etc. So in sales, it's all about, I don't talk about possibility, I talk about probability. What can we do to get a better outcome? And being a top salesperson doesn't mean you win everything. It's about how do we win more, and how do we increase the value as appropriate. So keep that in your mind. I will refer back to it. The reflection piece is so important in learning. The problem with working in a business and in a practice is it's so full on. It's so busy. So what happens is we do something. If it doesn't work, we try something different. So we go from experience to experiment to experience to experiment to experience to experiment. We just try different things. If it works, good, we'd stick with it. If it doesn't work, we'll try something different. The real learning is when you stop and reflect. And so part of these sessions, which is why I'm quite keen that people come for the full length, is because they bring those experiences to the table. They bring those reflections, and then it allows us to sort of pull them apart a little bit, And again, even today, you might say, I did this and this happened. What could I do differently? Bring those to the party, and then let's talk them through. Let's work them through, and that's where the real learning takes place. Okay, so I'm glad it's quite a small group, because when it's a big group, people are less chatty. So you don't have to answer all these questions, but these are just sort of some questions I'm throwing out there. What does sales mean to you? Do you think you're in sales, and how do you feel about sales? Well, when we say sales, what does that conjure for you? I'm not going to pick on anyone. If you want to share, please do.
I could chime in, certainly. So we're all in the same industry here, so I feel like we could all relate. But in my role as a patient care coordinator and marketing director, to me, it's finding the solution to the patient's problem. So it's selling them that the way they feel when they go to their reunion. It's selling them that one thing that's really bothered them about their waistline. So it's providing a product, a thing that satisfies their expectations.
Perfect. Carolina?
Hi. I would say for me, sales means building a relationship and educating like the patient enough so that they trust me to build from that, regardless of like I closed the sale initially or not. They've trusted me enough to email me back or reach back out to me or always meet with me from there on out, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Any negative connotations when we think about sales?
Yeah, I think it can be, absolutely. I think sales it could sound like you're coming from a place of just being greedy. Um, so we don't like putting sales in our titles here because no one wants to be sold. They
Yeah.
want to be educated. They want to feel that they got something that they needed, that they were helped.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. We named our company Sales MD. And so, that sort of then produces sort of some connotations. It's like, oh, do I, but um, I I see it as a communication tool. I see it as a way of communicating and understanding them before we talk. And fundamentally I believe that every child should go through sales training at school because it's such a strong tool to communicate. It's about understanding the other person, before, understanding yourself. And I always think about, our younger days maybe of dating. And it's like, hey, I'm Chris, I'm 6'2", and it's just like, oh, I felt sick. Versus, hi, how are you? And, understanding who they are, and so whilst that's, a very different environment, it's, there's sort of, it is about who are you talking to, what's important to them, what's going on in their life. And I think, Gina, I think you said it beautifully in terms of it's about providing a solution that meets their needs and their wants, that then sort of, we can deliver against. And if we can't, that's where we walk away, or we should walk away. And that's, again, being of service. Good. So what makes a good salesperson?
I think you're understanding the patient's needs, listening to the patient, asking the right questions to determine if the product you have is going to satisfy their needs.
Perfect. I don't tend to give up on things. I started a DBA, which is a doctorate, like a PhD, just called a DBA. And it's the only thing I really started and never finished, just because I was running a business, and it got to the point where I thought I actually can't do both. And but I learnt a huge amount, when you start reading academic papers on the sales and methodologies and account management and da, da, da. But the underlying piece in academia, which was really interesting, is what differentiates the best salespeople, sorry. What differentiates the best salespeople is the ability to ask impactful questions and to listen, which is exactly what you said. So when we think about sales, and and again, when I have a big audience, and I run, people say, charisma and influence and tenacity and charm, and the list is long and endless. Actually, it comes down to two things: the ability to ask questions and the ability to listen. And once you've got that, it's easy. And it really is. And one of my, prior to getting into this aesthetic medical space, I worked with corporates. And one of my clients was a company called Airbus. So I'm sure you've flown on one of their aircraft. Their biggest competitor is Boeing. But I was with the chief human resources, what's it called these days? Chief human officer. But I was with this lady, and she then started asking me questions. When do you think we could start this program, etc. And I smiled, and she said, why are you smiling? And I said, they're my questions to you, and you're asking them to me. So when you then start asking questions, when you then really start understanding who they are and taking them through the journey, and you can take them in the right direction through the questions you ask, they then get to a point where they're looking to buy because you've totally satisfied their needs, and their wants. So again, keep that in mind. It's really that simple. Great questions, lots of great questions, and listen intently. And so often, we think we know the answer. We've heard it lots of times. I was remembering teaching a plastic surgeon who focused on breast augmentations, etc. And he said afterwards, he said, I know where I'm going wrong. I've predetermined what they need. So as soon as they derobe and I see, I know as an expert what they should have. I've decided instantly. And so I then say, okay, we need to do this, and this. And then the answer let me think about it. And it's like, you're technically right. You're one of the top, breast surgeons in the US. You are technically right, but they're not buying because you haven't listened to them. You haven't taken them on the journey, and you need to ask them the questions. And he had this epiphany. And the result was, like a 35-40% conversion rate, suddenly 75-80% conversion rate. Nothing changes. He's now just asking more questions. He's going slower to go quicker. And that's another thing, is asking the questions. You might have to ask a few more questions, but now they're not going to be thinking about it quite so often. They're not going to disappear. And then you spend time chasing them on the phone and following up. You get it right here, and they're going to be in a far better place. And when we talk about questions, I always think question, 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 question. Really is that sort of ask all the questions. And then if you think you've asked all the questions, ask another question. And the reality, there's a balance there. I get that. But you'll probably be able to ask more questions than you are asking, right now. So why do people buy? Oh, Carolina.
So I had emailed you about today's class. I actually have a consultation at 12:30, so I have to log out a little earlier. If I end the consult a little earlier, I'll log back in. But if not, I'll see you for the next class at 12 o'clock.
Perfect. And you can
All
pick
right.
up on
Thank you
this.
so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
So it is back to you and I.
Great.
So listening to your answer so far, you get this. So why do people buy? What would you say a difference is between a want and a need?
So this industry is not a need, it's a want, and it's a emotional want. So asking the right questions to determine why, when, what's coming up, what have you tried, what went wrong, why are you here, why now? So it's asking those questions that's going to pull out the emotion of them saying out loud, I've tried X, Y, and Z, and it didn't work because you're here sitting in front of me. So it's uncovering why are they here now with you and what happened in the past where they didn't find what they wanted. And then you're providing them with the answer to their want.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The want is emotional, and it's all emotional driven. What I find interesting, though, is when we get into that medical setting, it all becomes about the formality of medicine. And that really is the need elements. It's the logic, it's the facts, and there's still a need, actually. It's not as explicit, but the need is for it to work, or for it to be safe, for there to be no ill effects, and so that's still there, and that still needs to be satisfied as part of that sales process. There are contraindications that need to be handled. There are, outcomes, bruising, redness, etc. So, but ultimately, they need it to work. They need it to be safe. They need it to not cause infections. It's just, you're right. The actual buying is more want driven. It's all emotion. The other thing I always say, quite often, and I've studied quite a lot of practices. At the earlier stages, price is a good, well, not necessarily price, but talking money early is good. And quite often we leave that to the end. So it becomes this sort of, especially for lesser experienced people or new people into the industry, it then ends up at price at the end and what they can afford. And so in that understanding all those, wants and needs, understand what their budget is and how they plan to pay for it, because it's a much easier conversation when it's more lighthearted and fun and exploratory at the beginning of that conversation than at the end. And it was interesting. I went with my partner to a dentist recently, and and you could sort of see the process. It was what's happened. There was obviously more medical, but it was cash based. And then right at the end, this other person turned up who we hadn't met with a piece of paper, and they said it's going to cost $12,000. And it was just like, who are you? You're not part of the process. And the first time we hear about money or even talk about it, and so it always feels awkward. And of course, then it's like, we'll go and think about it, which is very human. So talking, when you start to understand their wants early, including how much do they want to pay, that can be powerful. And I was coaching one of my other clients recently, and based on her medical expertise and the patient's requirements, the treatment was about $3,500–4,000. The reality is the patient only wanted to spend, or had only, $1,000 to $1,500. So now she had put herself in this position where, to give you what you want, it's 4,000, but what you can afford is 1,000. So now she's sort of like, well, we could just do this, but then it doesn't give her what she's just bought into, the dream. And so therefore asking early, what's your budget? If she'd understood that budget was $1,000, then she could have built a treatment plan based on everything she wants to achieve, but within the budget of 1,000. And as long as then that's expressed when you come to talk about the treatment plan, we can do this, this, and this for 1,000, then you're setting the right expectations. You're agreeing this is, the approach. Now, there's a piece here that says if she's not going to be happy with the results, then again, they're not an ideal candidate, because she wants $4,000 of treatment for 1,000. That's a different conversation. But if they're open to have, achieve this level of result for this amount of money, then again, we've matched their, as you said, we've understood their problem, and here's a solution to getting there.
So I have a question about that then.
Yeah.
Because the way I go about it, right or wrong, I'm not sure. Like you said, it's usually bringing the price at the end. So you're uncovering, you're asking the questions, you're building the value. Where they may have come in and said, oh, I budgeted 1,000, in their head. We don't know what that number is. And we're building the value, and we're building that connection. And now they trust you, and they're credible, and they walk in the office, and we have stellar providers, and they're really impressed, and they really trust you, and you're providing the treatment plan to them. And it's 2,500, and they in their head budgeted, I'm spending 1,000. To me, I feel like if they don't convert or they don't schedule, I didn't build the value enough, or I did something where, people buy an impulse too. People spend lots of money that they don't have all day long. So who's to say that they're like, okay, I really trust this place. I really want this result. I'm really excited. I have this coming up, and I'm going to spend that 2,500 now. Like, you got me. I'm excited. I'm really excited to get started. So, but if in the beginning you ask that question 1,000, and you're so careful to be in that 1,000, and that's not going to give them the best results, is that really doing the patient any favors? Is it doing the business any favors? I feel like you're cutting the business short, and you're cutting the patient short on results.
No, so what we need to, you're absolutely right. So what we need to do is, by understanding, say the 1,000 is their budget, we understand that's their starting point. And then from there, we can explore with them in terms of, you're absolutely right. You build that value, build that excitement. But you're then knowing the starting point is 1,000 in their heads. And so you're then moving them in that direction of, spending 2,500 to get the ideal result. So absolutely, you're building that value, you're building the excitement, you're talking about these are the results, but you're aware of where they're at to begin with. And so now you can sense check as you go through, how, are you moving their budgetary needle,
Mhm.
and such that you can, sort of put that 2,500 on the table, and close that, close them as a patient, and have them as a patient. So you're absolutely right. The reason for understanding, so you're right, you're not, well, there is another patient. There is that patient. I'm spending 1,000, and I'm not going to spend
Yeah,
a
right. And
dime
sometimes
more
it's
than a
just that way.
thousand. And I'm fixed on that, and nothing's going to happen unless it's 1,000. And again, you need to sort of, and again, for me, it's question, 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 question. So, what what's your hope to spend today? And it's like, 1,000. You not necessarily straight away, but you start to explore, is there any flexibility in that? Is there sort of, if I can show you some, phenomenal results, would you be open to, exploring different, maybe a different budget? So again, you're teasing from them, is, as you show more value and excitement, and paint this picture of the results, before and afters come in. This is what you could, this is some of the other results. Or Entity Med again is a great tool, because you can even sort of, let's take a photo and let's see what it could look like. So if you then go, if you do that, and you're right, people will spend more money. The other thing is, if it's 1,000, but then the treatment is 10,000, there comes a point, for, and again, this is the uniqueness of individuals. There comes a point that it becomes too much. And then it's hard to sort of work your way back. So I would have gone to 7, but now 10 is, that's too much. And then they go away and think about it. So it's tricky. But I think your approach is absolutely right. You don't want
Can
to
I ask
shortcut.
another
Yeah, please
question
do.
too? Because some people feel like in a consultation, you're providing the assessment, you're asking the questions, and then you're providing a personal treatment plan with options, perhaps different price ranges. So you have this package that'll get you these results, it's 5,000. But you have this package that'll give you these results, and it's 1,500. So how do you feel about providing a good, better, best, maybe good, better? Is there ever too many options? Obviously, mostly patients that come in, they're naive. So sometimes there's a sweet spot of education that you're providing before you lose them and they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So how do you approach that consultation where there could be different scenarios, but again, you don't want information overload, because then as soon as you hit that, the patients they won't buy anything. They won't do anything because they're just, you know,
I had a doctor, and his philosophy was good, better, best. And I struggled to ever change it. um, and the outcome every time was, let me think about it, because it was overload. It were,
right.
you are the medical expert. You are, I'm coming to you for your expertise, and now you're letting me decide where to go. It sort of, I don't know. That's, as you say, they're naive. They need that guidance. They need to feel the trust in you, that you've got their back, and therefore the treatment you're recommending. So again, I always think, if we're giving options, in my mind, it says we don't fully understand which direction they're going,
Right. Right.
because there's some questions unanswered, that we haven't got the answers to. So we're going to give them A and B because we don't know. So why would they know? So for me, let's ask some more questions. Let's really sort of narrow this down. I don't have an issue so much with, here's the treatment plan, here's an add-on, and sort of present it, in that way, so it becomes a little bit more, again, that emotion, and you're absolutely right. Again, and I think I've said this. For me, it's ethical selling, especially in sort of this medical world. Medicine comes first. So if the add-on is going to add some more value, enhance their treatment, enhance their recovery, enhance the longevity of the results, if that adds to it, then absolutely, we're being of service. We should add that on. And I don't mean it just from, hey, this, we can make another $1,000. That's almost the byproduct of being of service, of doing it well. But and in the moment you're thinking, I'm spending 4,000, what's another $500? It sounds good, I'll have it, because it adds value and it's going to enhance. So I'm happier with that approach. Again, it's about probability. If you really don't know and you're not getting the answers, then sometimes you have to use the A B. Do you want treatment plan A and treatment plan B? Because that's you're not getting the answers to questions that can help you determine. But I think, I think the more you can narrow it down with them, the better it is. Does that make sense? Yeah, good.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense.
I'm sure you're familiar with this. So I always think, and again, sometimes I cover the basics because I feel there's always someone that thinks, I haven't really thought of it that way. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. I always think every question should start with one of these words. Especially in that discovery phase. And when you rolled out some questions, you very much did this. So, what brings you in today? What are you looking to achieve? When are you looking to achieve it? You start with these questions. And the example I always give, if I say to you, is the weather nice where you are today? That's a closed question. Is the weather nice? You're going to say yes or no. And the reality is that doesn't give me any information, doesn't elicit any information from you. It's the weather's nice. And so what does that mean? The weather's nice. If I ask the question, what's the weather like where you are today? You're then going to describe the weather. Now I'm eliciting information. So we very often find ourselves asking closed questions. Now, most people might answer them. Is the weather nice where you are today? Yes, it's sunny. Yes, it's cold. So they do tend to expand, but it narrows the conversation. It keeps bringing the conversation to a close, which there is a point in the process we need to do that. So again, I sort of more share this. You're more experienced than this, but for the video, I sort of share it in terms of, think about the types of questions you're asking. Are they open? Are they closed? You really want to be lots of open questions at this stage. And then we'll just finish on this slide. Once you start asking the questions, you really want to start thinking about the structure of the questions. So I always say big, broad, open questions. So what brought you in today? And the one I always like is, what brought you in? The example I always give is, my daughter's getting married in the fall. I want to look great for the photos. As soon as we've uncovered that information, whatever that big motivation is, that needs to go in the patient notes. And this is the bit I think that's missed so often. Now, the rest, you've won them as soon as you've got that information. They are a patient, because now when they walk in to see the provider should be saying, oh, congratulations on your upcoming daughter's wedding, let's make sure you look gorgeous for the photos. Whatever that motivation is, whatever brought them here, that is the underlying driver for them to do something. And again, coming back to that budgetary question, if it's $1,000, and we're building that value, just even you're going to look, if we add this add-on, you're going to look even more stunning. Or, what we should do is have you come back 4 days prior to do hydrofacial, or, this, that, and the other, and then you're just going to be glowing. All of those things are about that motivation. So again, that becomes really important. But it starts with that big, broad, open question. Quite often we jump into the specific open questions. That's the starting point. What are you looking to achieve? And I always say I've got, bags under my eyes, and, so that's my, when I look at myself, I see these. So that's now into the detail. And so now we can sort of, if we focus on that, that's still really important. But now we're into that detail, into those specifics. And you don't know why it bothers me. You haven't uncovered my motivation. We're now getting into the details. So, and it's much easier to start at the top, as what brought you in today? Why now? Rather than sort of getting straight into the detail, because it's harder to circle back. And then the definitional open questions, and the example I always use, if we treat these under eyes, what do you want the results to be, Chris? And it's like, I want perfection. It's like, I want to look younger, and so it's like we all do. We need to understand, and again, this comes back to then setting expectations. What does perfection mean to you? Because someone can say, I want perfection, but, and I do want perfection, but also I'm realistic. But some people want perfection and are unrealistic. So what is perfection? And if we don't understand what their meaning is, that's where we then have this mismatch between a phenomenal result and then dissatisfaction, because what they had in their mind was different to what was delivered. Provider wasn't wrong. They've done a great job. Nothing is wrong from a medical point of view or a treatment point of view. It was just a lack of that definitional understanding in terms of what that really meant. And again, we need to clarify that. Another example on that, working with training a top deep plane facial plastic surgeon. When I went through this, and I went, what? And he said, I knew, and he does celebrities and royalty, and he said, I knew with this one patient, and he shared this, obviously no detail, but I just knew that I wasn't going to meet her requirements, although he's one of the best. And it's just been a complete pain ever since. Well, back then it was. And because he just didn't, what does that really mean? What are you looking for? And, and if he had dug deeper and had that harder conversation, he would have either said no or agreed that there's going to be a difference, and had that choice to walk away or, reset expectations. And so, yeah, they're sort of tend to be a little bit harder questions, but, nevertheless sort of fundamental. So I think as we sort of end today, it's think about the open questions: what, when, why, how, who and when, and then also start with the bigger questions, and then funnel down, let the flow of the conversation take you down into the definitional when needed.
Perfect.
Any final questions, thoughts, comments?
No, I think it's great. It's always, even though sometimes you may understand these things, it's great to kind of review, bring yourself back, that little refresher and really just think a little bit deeper about things. Um, so this was helpful. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I find myself reflecting sometimes because I sort of it's almost like a reminder for me, and then I think about a conversation I
Yeah,
had a week ago, and I thought, well, I didn't do that.
right,
It's
right,
like, oh, that's where it went wrong, So sometimes we know it; it's just sort of like a
right,
reminder. Sometimes
right.
we're doing it, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing it right, and sometimes it's new stuff. So
Yeah.
good.
Now,
Well,
will I get this presentation? I mean, I took notes, but
yes, I will. Um, it will record. I'm then going to load it on our website, and so you'll be able
okay,
to
great,
access it anytime, and it'll be there.
great.
Excellent. Thank you, Gina. Look forward to
Thank
seeing
you
you
for
next
your
week.
time.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you. Take care.
have a good day.
Bye
Bye-bye.
for now.